Let's talk about something that doesn't sit right with most people. The idea that humans weren't always at the top of the food chain. In fact, for a long time, we were prey. But here's the plot twist. Sometimes the creatures hunting us looked just like us. We're not talking about sabertooths or dire wolves. I'm talking about other human species. Prehistoric hominins, creatures that walked upright, made tools, maybe even buried their dead, but still stalked, killed, and ate us when they had the chance. Sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? But this isn't fiction. It's anthropology. It's raw, brutal history. And once you realize that early humans were being hunted not just by lions or leopards, but by other hominins, it changes everything about how we view our so-called evolution. So today, we're diving headfirst into the unsettling world of prehistoric species that hunted other humans. And trust me, by the end of this, you won't look at your distant cousins the same way again. Neanderthals, the original human predators. Let's start with the Neanderthals. Everyone loves to paint them as these misunderstood, gentle brutes who just wanted to live in peace and make cave art. And sure, some of that's true. They were intelligent. They buried their dead. They may have had language. But that doesn't mean they weren't dangerous. Because here's the thing. Neanderthals were physically stronger than us, like noticeably. They were built like tanks, thicker bones, stockier frames, and a bite force that would put modern MMA fighters to shame. And during the tens of thousands of years that we shared Eurasia with them, we weren't exactly best friends. Now, did Neanderthals actively hunt Homo sapiens? That's debated. But let's put the pieces together. There are fossil records with signs of trauma, crushed skulls, broken limbs, puncture marks. And some of these don't look like animal attacks. Some look personal. And in caves where Neanderthals and Homo sapiens once crossed paths, we find a disturbing pattern. Only one species ends up staying. Coincidence? I don't think so. And think about this. If food was scarce, if winter was coming, and if Homo sapiens were seen as weaker, slower, or simply the other, then what's stopping a starving Neanderthal clan from seeing us not as neighbors, but as meat? We tend to project our morals onto prehistoric people, but survival doesn't care about ethics. And if the roles were reversed, you can bet we'd do the same.
Homo erectus. Now let's rewind the clock even further, back to Homo erectus. This species lived over 1 million years ago, and they were everywhere. From Africa to Asia, they were the OG globetrotters of the human family tree. And while they weren't as stocky as Neanderthals, they were clever, coordinated, and terrifyingly efficient hunters. What makes Homo erectus so sinister is their silence. We don't know a lot about their social behavior, but we know they made weapons. They hunted in groups. They could run long distances without tiring, classic persistence hunters. In other words, they could wear you down until you dropped from exhaustion and then move in for the kill. Now imagine you're a smaller, weaker human species, say Homo Floresensis or early Homo sapiens. You're foraging for food when a group of taller, more coordinated Homo erectus tracks you down. You run, you hide, but they keep coming. No roaring, no intimidation displays, just this relentless pursuit, like ancient terminators. We found bones of early humans with signs of butchering, clean cuts, dismemberment, evidence of cooking. Some of those cuts, they're eerily similar to the way Homo erectus processed animals. So were they eating us? Were we just another entry on the menu? It's not just possible, it's probable. And then there's Homohidlebergenus, a name you probably haven't heard unless you're deep into paleoanthropology. But you should know it, because these were the true monsters of the Middle Pleistocene. Heidelbergensis was tall, muscular, and lived in a time where survival meant dominance. These people, and I use that word loosely, were some of the first to build shelters, hunt big game, and possibly even invent spear technology. They were apex predators, but with a chilling caveat. They weren't above cannibalism. In a Spanish cave called Atapuerca, scientists found bones of multiple Heidelbergensis individuals, including children, with unmistakable cut marks. These weren't ceremonial burials, these were dismemberments. Skulls cracked open for the marrow, limbs stripped clean. Now maybe they were eating their dead to survive. Maybe it was ritualistic. Or maybe, and this is the dark possibility, they were hunting each other, picking off rival groups, raiding, killing, feasting. And if they did it to their own kind, imagine what they did to other species. The idea that Homo sapiens descended from creatures like this, it's haunting, but it's also brutally real.
The case of hobbits and giants, not just fairy tales. All right, let's get even weirder. Homo Floresensis, nicknamed the Hobbits, were these tiny hominins who lived on the island of Flores in Indonesia, barely over 3 feet tall, with brains the size of grapefruits, but somehow they survived for thousands of years. Until they didn't. What wiped them out? We showed up. Homo sapiens arrived on Flores roughly 50,000 years ago. And then poof, no more hobbits, no trace, no struggle, just extinction. Now, some argue it was climate change, others blame disease, but let's be honest, it was probably us. And maybe not in a peaceful, oops, we outcompeted you kind of way. Maybe it was violent. Maybe it was intentional. Maybe it was hunting. Because think about it, to our ancestors, these smaller humans would have looked alien, primitive, less than. And humans have a long, dark history of destroying what they don't understand. And it goes both ways. On the flip side, in legends passed down through tribal oral history, not just in Indonesia, but in places like Papua New Guinea and the Philippines, there are stories of giants, violent, cannibalistic giants who lived in caves, hunted humans, and vanished with the arrival of modern people. Sound familiar? Could those have been remnants of other hominin species? Maybe even surviving populations of Denisovans? We laugh at folklore, but sometimes folklore is just memory wearing a mask.
Denisvens, the ghost hunters of the Himalayas. Ah yes, the Denisvens, the most mysterious players in this whole prehistoric drama. We don't have full skeletons. We don't even have that many bones. Just a few teeth, a pinky, and some genetic breadcrumbs scattered across Asia. But their DNA is everywhere, literally. If you're from Southeast Asia, Melanesia, or even parts of East Asia, there's a good chance you've got a little Denisven in you. But here's what's wild. Denisvens were huge. Their teeth were massive, their bones thick, and their genetic adaptations to high altitudes mind-blowing. We're talking about a species that was possibly tailor-made to survive in places like the Tibetan Plateau, where oxygen is low, temperatures are brutal, and everything wants to kill you. But why does that matter? Because that kind of environment shapes predators, not pacifists. If Denisvens were roaming these unforgiving regions, they had to be ruthless to survive. And when they encountered Homo sapiens, smaller, less adapted, maybe lost in a mountain pass, do you really think they invited them over for tea? There's no direct fossil evidence of Denisvens hunting humans, but let's not play dumb. These weren't gentle giants, and our ancestors didn't just mix with them. They likely fought them again and again. Some genes passed down, others got wiped out. And get this, in some ancient Siberian caves, scientists have found signs that both Neanderthals and Denisvens lived there together for a while, which opens a whole new terrifying possibility. What if there were alliances between these species? What if Homo sapiens weren't just dealing with one type of predator, but two, working in tandem? That's not evolution. That's warfare. When humans became monsters too. Now, before we start acting like we were the poor, innocent victims of prehistoric horror stories, let's face the uncomfortable truth. We became the hunters too. Once Homo sapiens figured out how to make advanced tools, control fire, and work in larger groups, we stopped being prey, and we started wiping out everything in our path, including our fellow hominins. There's a reason we're the last ones left. We didn't just outcompete species, we eradicated them. We took over their hunting grounds, we burned their forests, we spread disease. And yeah, in some cases, we probably ate them. Because here's the dirty little secret of evolution. Intelligence doesn't always come with kindness. Sometimes it comes with cruelty. Calculated, efficient cruelty. The kind that sees another human-like species and thinks, threat, resource, or target. We like to believe that Homo sapiens survived because we were smarter, more adaptable, better at storytelling. And sure, all that might be true. But maybe, just maybe, we also survived because we were more ruthless, more dangerous. The real monsters wearing human faces.
Prehistoric predators, evolution's darkest mirror. So where does that leave us? It's easy to look back at these ancient species, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Denisovans, Heidelbergensis, and think of them as something other, as distant, forgotten chapters in the story of humanity. But they weren't aliens. They weren't animals. They were us. Not in the poetic we're all connected way, I mean genetically, biologically. They were human, just a different kind, a rival kind, one that walked beside us for thousands of years before vanishing into the dirt. And maybe that's the scariest part, because when you realize that prehistoric humans were being hunted and we're doing the hunting, it forces you to ask a brutal question. How much of that still lives in us? Is our history of violence just a phase? Or is it baked into our DNA? Did we inherit not just their tools, their bones, their genes, but also their fear, their rage, their hunger? Because evolution doesn't delete code, it builds on top of it. And deep down, under the layers of civilization, TikTok trends, and Google Maps, maybe we're still those same creatures, still hunting, still haunted, still human.
The animal with a mind. So, what separates us from those other hominins? What made Homo sapiens the last one standing? It wasn't just tools. Neanderthals had spears. Homo erectus used fire 1 million years ago. It wasn't just brains. We weren't that much smarter, pound for pound. The real difference? We combined intelligence with strategy, with social cohesion, with the ability to plan to kill, not out of immediate hunger, but out of fear, paranoia, or ideology. We didn't just hunt with clubs. We hunted with ideas. And that's the terrifying truth no one wants to sit with, that the most dangerous creature to ever walk this planet wasn't some saber-toothed beast or giant crocodile. It was an animal with a mind. An animal that could look at another version of itself and choose to eliminate it. Not because it had to, but because it could. Because it saw the future and didn't want to share it.
We are the last cannibals standing. If there's one thread tying all this together, Neanderthals, Denisovans, Heidelbergensis, and us, it's cannibalism. Yeah, I said it. Real, stomach-turning, fire-roasted cannibalism. It shows up everywhere. Cut marks on thigh bones, skulls cracked like coconuts, and not just in desperate, starvation-level situations. Sometimes it was cultural, sometimes it was tactical, and sometimes it was just human nature.
In prehistoric terms, cannibalism wasn't a last resort. It was part of the toolkit, a way to dominate, a way to terrorize, a way to win. And while we like to believe we've evolved past that, have we really? We still exploit, still dehumanize, still turn rivals into resources. No, we don't eat each other anymore, but we sure as hell consume each other in every other way. Online, economically, politically. We just replaced the bone tools with keyboards. The final predator. So here we are, the lone survivors, the last of the hominins. We tell ourselves we're the pinnacle, the chosen ones, the ones who were meant to inherit the earth. But what if the truth is darker? What if we didn't earn our place at the top of the food chain? We stole it, took it by force, by fire, by the unrelenting will to outlast, outfight, and outkill everything else that looked like us. What if we weren't chosen, just left over? Because the others didn't stand a chance. And that's the part of human evolution we don't like to talk about. That maybe, just maybe, the only reason we're still here is because we were the best at being the worst, the most cunning, the most united, the most cold-blooded, the ultimate predator with a conscience.